All right, welcome back everyone to J-Face Games. Today we're continuing our conversation about positions in this system. Last time we were talking about how can we incentivize the players to move around. And in other words, there's the concept of real kind of hard tactics and then perceived tactics, meaning that if you're moving around, it might feel more tactical from a perception, like, oh, I'm having to go here and do this, as opposed to just locking down in one position or one wedge or whatever. I don't want to eliminate the desire to do the other way of playing, but we're trying to figure out what are some goals or what are some rewards we can give people if they play certain ways. So, what do we mean by that? Well, this is what we talked about last time in terms of if these are reasons to want to possibly stay in a position. So different benefits you'll get, and this is in the last video, different benefits you might get for staying in the same position. And today we're going to talk about what are some benefits you get when you change positions. So one thing, I really took a page from ICRPG again, and I like the idea of potentially changing the distance names. So previously the positions we had were engaged, behind, nearby, short distance, and long distance. And so now thinking about keeping engaged and behind the same, but making nearby close, and short distance nearby, and long distance far, because I think that those names invoke a little bit more in terms of like theater of the mind, and it gives you a little bit more leeway as a DM potentially in terms of describing that. So I like those terms, right? So I already went ahead up here and I edited those same like new words. So I'll be curious what you guys think. For these reasons to change, this got a little, I'll show you what kind of happened at first. At first I started saying, okay, well maybe you have close to engaged, you have engaged to close, you have close to nearby, you have nearby to close. And all of these are technically different changes or shifts in distances, right? And you could say, oh, well, if you're going from close to nearby, maybe that's like a charge and you're getting plus to, attack, and this got a little overwhelming, obviously, because you look at this and you go, okay, that's too much, right? There's too much going on there. Like, you could define out what each one of these sort of signifies, but that's going to be cognitive load if a player's thinking about all of this stuff up here, the benefits of staying in one place, and all of these different benefits from different position changes. That might be exhausting. So I started to then think in terms of like, what happens if you just have a nice little table, right? So let's create a little table, right? Where in essence, the table is range, start, and end, right? And what this means is that you have our different sort of positions, nearby and far, right? And then you end up having a new action, right? Where we're already talking about having this sort of like 2-action economy, right? Actions, choose 2, right? And those actions previously we talked about attacking, we talked about moving, we talked about maybe like delaying or readying, because that's typical in most systems. Defensive or dodge, it's typical if you're like, oh, I'm going to use an action to support myself. I introduced the RP action, but then I started thinking about what if there is a position action, right? But it's free, right? So that means that on your turn, you're going to take one position action and then 2 of these other actions, right? So I'll highlight this out and say that's a free action that's going to happen, right? So now you start saying the difference here is if I start engaged, like if I'm already engaged with someone and I'm starting engaged, there is an action or a benefit I can take here. Enemy move equals attack of opportunity, right? If I end here, meaning I've moved to engaged, no matter what distance I've gone from, I get +1 damage. Or maybe it's like +1 party dice, right? +1 party die. So now And then here, I'll write out some of the ones I also came up with, just as an example. So now I have react, so close, if I'm close and I'm starting, I can use a reaction to engage or avoid engage, right? Meaning that like if someone's moving, an enemy's moving, enemy moving invoked, right? Invoked. Meaning there's like an enemy's moving and no one engaged with me, I can use my reaction to then engage that person. So now that's very technical because it's like he's gonna run by and he's gonna try and get to my buddy, and so I can do that, right? Or maybe no reaction to use a delayed action, a delayed attack, right? I don't know. Or you use a reaction to take a defensive action. Or maybe just +1 party die, right? Where my thought here is that the close range is like you're in the thick of it, you're in the furry, but you're in the fray, but you're kind of seeing like, okay, where are people at? And so because of that, you can react, right? So you can come in, you can have a delayed attack. Normally, and there's a lot of systems that when you use a readied or delayed, like D&D 5e, when you use a delay or readying an action, it means you're going to burn your reaction to then use that. Well, maybe if you end your turn in the close range, you don't have to burn your reaction. Or you can use your reaction to then make a defensive, use your defensive dodge. You're like, you know what, I'm not going to use it for that. I'm going to use it for a special ability, but then whatever. So I think that's interesting. Nearby, access to suppression action. So what this is that there's another action we'll add in here called suppression, right? And I don't know 100% what suppression means in terms of an action. It's probably something like you give, like maybe you, in, what's the game called? In Savage Worlds, I think in essence it kind of like gives the enemy disadvantage on their attacks. So that might be super powerful, and obviously bosses might be able to nullify, like you can't suppress like bosses or certain bosses. But it might be something along those lines where you're giving your friend advantage to like a defensive role. Maybe that's in essence what it is, right? So we'll put, not sure what suppression means, but if you're nearby and you start nearby, it's like you're locked into place, and so you can add suppression to someone. Or if you end nearby, maybe you can give an ally one of your actions. Or suppression action again, maybe, right? Or I keep putting +1 party die here because it's like maybe just by moving, and that might be completely hackable, but maybe by moving you can add to this party die that we already talked about before. But once again, if this party die caps at like a D6 or a D8, that's not a big deal. Like if this got up to a D10 and everyone was just moving around in order to get it to 10, and then someone just goes and just massively spikes someone, that'd be a problem. But right now, because it's still sort of like we're gonna beta test this thing, giving +1 party dies a lot, I don't care. I'm okay with that. And then finally, if you're really far away, I thought about using your reaction to stop movement towards you, meaning like if one mob tries to move either from close to nearby or nearby to far and like towards you, you could use a reaction to halt that movement action. So now they could use another movement action to try and get closer, but now they couldn't like move and attack you potentially or something like that. So it's like you're using your reaction to kind of like keep them from coming at you, right? And who knows, there might be feats that allow you to use your reaction to target 2 monsters or 3 monsters, and so you can kind of like keep them at bay. And then maybe like if you end you're running, so you're going too far, maybe this is like you cover retreat of some sort, so some sort of action where it's like you're making it so your buddies can move and etc. So this has been the beginning of a thought for me, where it's like, what does it mean to start in these ranges? What does it mean to move into those ranges? And therefore, if I've got one position action a turn, now my turn might look something like this, where it's like, okay, I've got 2 actions, I'm already here, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to attack this monster twice. I'm not engaged with it, so I'm going to stay in close range, meaning that I'm going to attack this monster twice because I'm maybe a rogue, And what I want to do is that when if something comes near me, I'm going to use my reaction to back away, right? Or you're like kind of a tankish person, and you have a feat that I'm engaged with this monster, but this feat lets me use the close start ability because I'm a sentinel, right? So now as that sentinel, yes, I'm engaged with this guy, but I can still use the close ability. So when this guy tries to move towards my wizard, I can use my reaction to engage him, you know, something like that. So now you have this position action, which I think is interesting, right? The other thing to think about is this whole, like, I've been thinking a little bit more about ICRPG as well in terms of like their movement. He doesn't even have a move action. He just sort of like, if someone's close, just do your attacks, right? And if someone's nearby, that means you gotta move and attack. And if someone's far, you only can move there, right? And so that's interesting, and I don't know if I want to get rid of the move action altogether. But it's a thought, you know, there's a thought there in terms of like ICRPG, this thing, where you kind of eliminate that. And what I kind of like about that from some regards is that, like, I don't know if I'm close and I want to engage someone, right now in this system, that's a move action, right? I just move into engage, like I just engage them. Or if I'm engaged, I have to use a move action to get to a close range. Where it's like, maybe instead of that, you have, you bring in the RP action. Like the RP action now is the instigator for engaging or moving within the close range, right? Like it's all just RP. Like RP is how you also how you get behind, right? It's all just this RP action. So now you get rid of move, because if I'm gonna go from close to nearby, it automatically means that I only have one action or one attack available. Or if I want to go from close to far, I can't do anything but get there, right? So I don't know. That's just I'm still conceptualizing that some, but it's an interesting thought in terms of like potentially switching. But it's an interesting thought in terms of like switching some of these ideas around in terms of what do these movements mean, what's happening here. So we will come back to that. I'll be curious what you guys think. That's it for today. I think that's it for today. Let me look, see if I had any other concepts here. Yeah, I think that's it for today. I'm gonna probably go into more about like when to use pluses and advantage versus even like double advantage and things like that at some point in time, because I still love the advantage system we have, and pluses are positive. Like, but I think it's one of those things that as this gets flushed out, you know, when do you use some of those things? So anyways, all right, anyways, hit the bell button, hit the subscribe button, and leave some comments because I'd love to hear what you guys think. Next video coming up.